Kuzankula, and welcome to the show. It's a pleasure being in front of you and introducing our first guest for the show. She has been an inspiration for me and many of us, and I take the pleasure of introducing Aum Phub Zam, the first female president of BCCI in the 36 years of its history, and also the managing director of Yarki Group of Companies. If you could tell us something about, where you were born and something about your parents.
Thank you for having me on this show, Tsering, and Kuzampula, to all the viewers. I'm Phub Zam. I'm from Chapcha, and though I was born in Chapcha, I moved to Thimphu because the road from Phuntsholing to Thimphu was started in the 60s, and with the road my parents brought us here to Thimphu. In fact, we are amongst the first settlers of Thimphu.
Yes. And what about your education?
Oh, that is a very interesting subject, and I think this is something most people would not know, the interesting part of it. I was around 5 years old when I was taken to a boarding school in St. Joseph's Convent. Now, since you're very young, you will not know, how education was at that time. In the 60s, there was no formal education in Bhutan. So most of, people around my age, we were sent to India on a scholarship. And my siblings, we are 6 of us, my elder sister, Dauzam, she got a scholarship and she was taken to Dr. Graham's homes. My father took her. Then was Dagobida, my other sister. She went to St. Joseph's Convent. Now when it was my turn, it wasn't that I got a scholarship. But my father, those days, he used to go to, it's now called The Silab Maba Shah Thelo. So he used to go there to barter, he used to take kapchi. And from there he used to get rice and zao. So when he went to Shah, his, host family, so his host family had received a letter to send his daughter to Kalimpong. So the father was very upset and he was very, disturbed. And then he was telling my father, my daughter, I don't want to send her because she surely will get killed. So my father said, no, my 2 children are studying in Kalimpong. So nothing will happen. He said, no, ngadidi chalma chunu khemi, chuna shiru khemi teba nipumdi maplera mitanse. So my father, then he felt, I think, quite sorry. And to take him out of his predicament, he said, Tupte, then I'll, help. So the father, his host was so relieved and happy, and he gave him chumda, zauda extra, because he was so relieved. And then my father sent me in her place to Kalimpong.
And so how did you get into this career? So what was your first job?
Oh, okay. Now, at that time, it was, I think, in the 70s, 78. In the 70s, I think Chuka hydropower started. Now, all this time, people now, what they see here, it's like the modern Bhutan that we see. But at that time, infrastructure development is happening. And not that I'm very old, I must tell you, but then, during my time, infrastructure development was taking place. And 78, Chuka hydropower started. And also roads were being constructed in some other parts, like in Samzongkha, Bangtar, Sarbang. I know all these because, at that time, my first job which I started was trucking.
Wow, trucking.
Yes, transportation. Yes. And it was, we used to call it Bhutan Transport Syndicate. Yes. It's now no more. But at that time, it was mostly men who were actually, owners of these trucks. And the only business actually at that time was, I think, trucking and maybe trading, I think.
So you did a lot of traveling around?
No. It was the owners had trucks and we had to register with this Bhutan Transport Syndicate. Yes. So it was turn by turn. It was, a roster was kept in the Bhutan Transport Syndicate. So if you were to buy a truck, then you're supposed to do a plain running. That was a requirement for the trucks that time. Now I wonder, boss, these days you get a truck and straight away it comes to Thimphu, no?
I know.
But at that time, I think the trucks were made in such a way that you need to do this, it was called plain running. So any new truck owners had to keep it in the plain running for 3,000 kilometers. Now, when my truck, I got it and I still remember the number. That time, our vehicle numbers have undergone a lot of changes actually. Quite interesting. That time it was called BWT, Bhutan West Truck. So T means truck. So it was called BWT and the number was 5151.
After that, where did your career path take you?
Yes. I always say that, whatever I do, there is always a story to my life. And, in my life, there are so many stories. Now, the next was my shop, and when I was setting up the shop, then I thought, okay, I need to have a name for the shop. So I thought, okay, now if I call it like my daughter's name, Dichen or Ugen or Sonam Chongkang, no, everybody can copy because everybody has the same name. Yes. So I was always wanting to have a unique name. And then one morning, like at about 6 in the morning, this name like Yarke just flashed in my mind. Yes. So I got up and then I wrote the name down. And that time I was I used to live in Phunsuling. So I was living in a flat. And there was a gentleman called Kung Fen Karma. He came up with the first Kung Fen digest actually. So he was upstairs and then I gave him the word whether to make it Yarkey, Kay, Jay. So I found that Yarkay was nice.
Yes. Oh, so that is how you...
Yes, that's how I got the name.
Yes.
And then my shop then was called Yarke Enterprise.
Yes.
And my capital that time was 100,000 Bunchi. Mola.
Must have been a lot those days though.
No, I don't think it was that much actually. But then I started to, set up this shop, which those days we used to call it foreign goods shop. Yes. Now there were already some shops, run by, some of the Indians, they had their shops like Jaiswal and Kumar Trading and all. But then my shop, what set it apart was in the design. I set up a very trendy shop. And then I had that time a very old person, a manager, Mr. Pradhan. So I took him with me and we went to Dulabari, yes. So as a companion, I took him and I bought about 90,000 worth of goods. But I bought in goods which were not available because that time, it's not like now that we get so many varieties of clothes and all. Those days you couldn't even get proper baby clothes. And because I had growing, small children that time, so I knew that you needed clothes. And then like the jeans, I still, some of my old customers, they still recollect about the jeans. It was called Hara jeans and Grosby shoes and cassettes. And so I used to sell that. And the first time in 3 days, actually, my whole stock sold out.
Wow, yes. That's quite an achievement.
Yes. And actually at that time, because I couldn't fill my shop, then I had asked for Bhutanese, goods from here, Thimphu, like pangchus and, those type of things, just to fill up my shop and to look, to make it look a bit like filled up.
Yes.
So that's how the shop and, I used to sell music cassettes.
Oh, yes.
And it was a hit actually, and that's how I learnt about music, and I learnt about country music and rock, AC/DC, Scorpio, all those Scorpions, I mean. Yes.
If you can tell us something about your family also, on how did you manage all this? I know you have children, I know you have grandchildren, so how did you manage? Maybe if you can tell us something about your children and your grandchildren.
Yes. Now, I will have to start with my father, My father, he was 89 when he passed away in 2011. My mother, Feng Zam, she's still living. She's 90 years old. Yes, but she's very good for her age. She can read and then she's still very independent. And though she lives with me, but she lives like, in a separate small cottage. And my father, I think most of our traits, I think, were from our father. He was a very strict, actually, disciplinarian, actually. But those days, he would be termed as a very sought after, mup, because he was, jack of all. He could do tailoring, he could do masonry, he could do carpentry, cooking, and in fact, most of the choshogi, the things which you need in the choshomula,
Yes.
he used to actually stitch it himself.
Wow,
Yes.
bless. And what about your children?
Yes, I have 3 children. My eldest is my daughter Dichen, and Ugen is the elder son, and then Sonam Penjo.
Yes.
They are all actually very highly qualified, and they love actually, being in movies, and their hobbies and their passions are actually in that creative art, actually.
Yes. Oh, that's very interesting. And I think I've watched some of the movies that they've acted in. It's really nice to see a woman, especially a mother, trying to encourage their children to do what they love, because I think it's quite difficult, especially in a country like ours, where you cannot live your passion. And I think I must say that, your children are blessed. In the meantime, I know you were raising kids also. So how did you balance your
Yes,
career as well as your family? Was it difficult?
Yes, I think a bit for the woman it's difficult. You actually need an understanding spouse.
Yes.
You need someone who supports you. And at that time, my children, after they grew up, then I sent them to boarding schools.
Yes.
So I think that gave me the time.
Time.
Otherwise, if they were here full time, I wouldn't be able to.
Yes. And what about your grandchildren?
I have 5 grandchildren, and when I say about my children, I think I always wanted them to, complete their studies, do their universities and all, maybe because I could never go to university.
Yes.
So that way they have been blessed that, they could, get their education. 4 boys.
Ooh, nice.
The eldest is 11,
Yes.
in fact, Rafi,
Yes.
and the youngest is a girl. So I have 4 boys and 1 girl.
So I know is very popular for a lot of people who know about Feng Shui. So how did the interest start?
Les, I always believe in, reasons, why things happen to you for a reason. And, when I was building my house in Thimphu, because around 2007, around I think 2000, I moved to Thimphu. And in 2007, in 2006, I was building my house. So I did hear that, there is Feng Shui to actually see the direction of the entry of your house. So I was actually very keen to get to know about Feng Shui. So I looked up books. I looked up in the internet, but it was always showing like, Australia or England. And then in one of my books, I saw an email. So I sent an email to my master. He's called Raymond Low from Hong Kong.
Yes.
And I said that I'm building a house. Can you tell me where I should, have my door entry and where the placement of my rooms should be? So he sends me a email back, and he says, send me the drawings and tell me where north, south, east, west is, and it will cost $5,000. So, and for me, it's like for any other, Bhutanese thinking, oh my God, why should I spend $5,000, to get a good entry? Because I did not know actually that it is very helpful and it is required.
And
but at that time, yes,
5,000 is a lot.
yes, So then, but then he said, I do hold classes. So if you would like to, then you can also attend my class. So then I went to Hong Kong, I attended his class,
Yes.
and there you learn the basics of Feng Shui. And after that, then I went to Malaysia because I found a friend when I was attending that class, though she was 11 years into it, Melinda.
Yes.
So I went to Malaysia to learn more because in that 8 days, you just learn the basics, So I went to Malaysia and I stayed some days with her to learn the practical part of Feng Shui.
Yes.
Then I went to Singapore. So, but I feel that, having learned Feng Shui has not only helped me a lot, but I've been able to reach out and help a lot of my friends and people who come to me. I always, make time that I, even, last time I went to Punakha to do a Feng Shui.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Yes.
And what are some basic Feng Shui that you could tell our viewers? Like, we must be getting a lot of things wrong. So
Yes.
maybe just few, like basic, what do you think we need to be mindful of?
Yes. When you are building a house, actually, that's the time that, you need to then see the land. Like for me, I go to see the land, then I will have to see the directions of how the entry would affect you. Because, Feng Shui is actually like the horoscope of a building, of how it affects the inhabitants.
Yes.
And like Keka labni yoba mula. So Keka is like the horoscope. So the basic Feng Shui that I always tell people is, in their sitting positions, like you are in an office. So depending on your year of birth, whether you're a male or female, there's some calculations. So I make them, actually sit according to that. But for that, then I need to do some calculations.
Yes.
The only, like the basic thing which someone could, learn is, like when you're sitting in an office, never sit where, the pointy, like you see, the pointed, the wall.
Yes.
That should not be pointing at you, because that is like poison arrows at you.
Oh, yes.
So if for a long time you are sitting facing it or, near it, then there are health problems.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, La. So what were your other interests, La?
And things close to my heart, if I can share.
Yes,
If
yes,
that
yes,
is
yeah.
okay with. Nowadays we have this stock market. It's called RSEB, Royal
Yes,
Securities. Now, those days when it started, because I think for the viewers it will be very interesting to know how shares started in Bhutan.
Yes.
Yes, la. When Pendant Cement Authority, PCL we call it, Pendant Cement Authority Limited, the royal government at that time felt that, private people should get into shares, should know about business. And actually this is all to do with the vision of our king, the fourth king at that time. He felt that, people should know what industries is all about. But how can they know if they are not given an opportunity? So after PCA had completed its construction and also its production, the people of Bhutan were given the opportunity to buy shares. But each household were given only about 100,000 through Bumchi.
Yes.
So whether you're 10, 6 in that family, you could only buy 100,000. Now at that time, we did not have the money to even buy 100,000.
Yes.
So in my family, like we are 5, the father, mother, and the 3 children. So we bought 10,000 Neutrum worth of shares
Yes.
of PCL. And then the next share, which the government again floated and made the public buy, was the Bhutan Carbide and Chemicals. It's called BCCL shares. At that time, the government said people who can buy 5% of the shares get to sit on the board. And also, we only have to come up with 25% of the money.
Yes.
The 75% is given as loan by the government, by the banks, but the guaranteed repayment is by the government.
Yes.
So I remember this incident that when that share was being floated, I had to go to Finland.
Yes.
But, I'm ever optimistic and I always look at opportunities, in whatever new comes up, and I always want to take on that challenge and that, opportunity which comes up. So I told Penjo, and I said that you must buy the share, 5%. He said, we don't have the money, so how can we buy? But somehow I said, no, you have to promise. And I made him say, Kinchusum, you will buy, So I went to Finland. When I came back, just because, he said to keep his promise, he bought the share, but then he went 50-50 with Tasho Duji, our neighbor.
Yes.
So they bought 5% of the BCCL shares.
Then what was your next step in your career after that?
Plus, then, dealership now you see like dealers for this company, that company,
Yes.
So that way, actually, when we go through the stages of business in Bhutan, that way the government, has actually tried to bring in a lot of ideas, and one of them was the demonopolization, because that time only a few companies had only that, company to look after, or
Yes.
I mean to deal in. So the government said it cannot only be one company who has one, example, say everyday milk, okay, Nestle. So Nestle cannot be only with one company. You need to have another to have
Yes.
competition.
Yes.
So like that, the chamber said, okay, these are the various companies. So whosoever is interested then must, try to get those companies to be the other dealer in the country.
Yes.
Now, I remember it was in the banquet hall that there were, I think, about 20 items, 20 companies which needed additional dealers. So for me, being in the construction, knowing about construction a bit, I opted for Tata,
Yes.
steel and agrico tools and all. And we were, I think about 12 of us who were interested. Now, who to give it to? It's a dilemma, no? So they said, okay, the best thing is lottery.
Yes.
So let's do a lottery.
Yes.
And then somebody came with a plate, and then, there were, I think, all guys, 11 guys, and I was the 12th one, but the only woman there.
Yes.
So everybody, picked up. And then I was waiting for them to say, okay, they got it. But no one. And the last one I picked up and I got the dealership.
Oh, less. You were raising a family, you had a career. So what were some of the challenges as a woman that you've faced?
Yes. In this wonderful country of ours, where we have, the protection of our deities and the guidance of our visionary leaders, I find that, we are fortunate that we are here in this country where we do not have so much of obstacles and all.
Yes.
But for me personally, those days, like I said, I was living in Phun Soleng, and most of these meetings were taking place in Thimphu. So I had to commute, and I used to find that very nerve-wracking actually.
Yes.
Was if you really think about it, okay, now we have this road diversion which is a bit bigger, so the threats to life is also less,
Less,
But
yes.
at that time, the hair-raising bends
I know,
was something
yes.
which,
Yes.
I had to be quite wary of.
Yes.
And again, when you reach from from Chapcha to Gedu, to Sorchen actually, the fog was, I think I had to travel quite a lot. And I used to always think to myself, okay, once it's 12 after 12 a.m., I'm not going to go down, because, many a times the fog, like you can't even drive,
Yes.
I used to have a driver, but
Yes.
sometimes I had to drive, but still, it was like a very, I think, scaring.
Yes.
So I think this is something which, I don't know, for me, I found that as a challenge, you know.
Yes.
But in other aspects, okay, normal, like inadequate, money, lack of, money to start a business, like how any normal business would have, not having experienced employees. So those, except for those challenges.
Yes. Yes. Now, you are the first female president for BCCI. How does it feel to be the first female president? What motivated you to?
For me personally, my interaction was with BCCI from the 80s, because when I look back, and in fact this morning, coming here for the interview, I happened to glance at my award, which I got in 1984.
Yes.
And I used to actually help the chamber to get the membership fees, to help the funding, the donation for cyclone affected people in Orissa, in Bangladesh, the flood victims. So I think always when there was a calamity, then the chamber was asked to, come up with help. So at that time, Penjo, he was the executive member, but to help out, I used to collect. Now, why I opted or why I became, the president is because I felt that, the private sector, if I were to be the president, I could help the private sector in trying to see that, all the business, not only the big business houses, but even, the smaller business houses, to see that the engine of growth, like, the government always says, private sector is the engine of growth. But then I found that the growth of the private sector was a choked engine. It was not happening. So with whatever little, knowledge or the experiences that I have, in my business, I felt that if I could put that into the chamber and see that, the government as a partner to the private sector, we could help, the private sector to grow. So first and foremost, it is actually, me actually as a person, I do love helping people. But in my little way, I can reach out a little bit. But being the president, I felt that I could reach out to our business community in a much larger way. One of the reasons why I opted to be the BCCI president is coming from, a business background, from the grassroots. We have, like, I have worked myself up. It's like, from the 60s, like I told you, how, country was at that time, starting with the infrastructure. So being there when it started, and then, along the way, the experiences that one gains. So I felt that, my experience and what practical, problems and the issues that we have in doing our business would, give me the tools to be the president of the BCCI.
To be successful and independent like you, any message for our viewers?
Yes, I do have a few messages, so I think if I just say it, I did pen down a few of, the messages that I would like to pass on to the viewers. Nothing is impossible with hard work, dedication and perseverance. One needs to focus on your strengths and not only on your weaknesses. For me, every day when I get up, I always, I'm grateful that, I'm alive, and one must offer, and we call it an attitude of gratitude. So we must offer an attitude of gratitude, be grateful that we are living in this beautiful country of ours.
Yes.
With our enlightened monarchs to guide us, the pristine environment and the vibrant culture. Why I refer to that is because, that is the truth, we are. And I always, when I get up and I'm in my chosham, saying my prayers, I always, first of all, I am grateful. And for our future generations, we must strive to do the best that we can. And for that, all of us, in our own little ways, I always say that we must contribute towards nation building.
Yes, thank you so much for talking to us. And for our viewers, I hope you enjoyed listening to Aum's story and learning from her experience that everything in life happens for a reason and hard work pays off at the end. But just before we wind up, let's see what are some of Aum Phub Zam's 5 favorite things.
Blue. ये कहाँ आ गई है? Thornbirds. Salmon steak. Art of Living by S.N. Goenka. I'm very positive, friendly, and very humble. I think I love dancing, a dancer, as well as, I love reading books.